Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so happy that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Jedley Magic on Twitter, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram. Our guest today is Scott Rubin, telling us about his great book, Naming Your Little Geek. Hey, before our guest comes in, we gave a sneak preview of the Solve It for Kids podcast here on Reading with Your Kids, and it was so popular, it's like spun off. It spun off into its own thing. And my buddy, our dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson, is here to tell us a little bit about what's going on with this great new podcast. Hey, Jennifer, what's up?
Hi, Jed. Oh, I am so excited about our new podcast. We've been getting some great reviews. Everybody wants to find out what's going on and meet and listen to some of our scientists and engineers. We have done how do you map an underwater forest?
Yeah.
We have done how do you cut a person in half safely, of course.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We have talked about improving your connection with water by going on a water walk, and we have watched Vanessa Brantley Newton create illustrations that come to life.
I took a water walk with my amazing niece. We had such a great time. I didn't fall into the water, but it was really, really fun. And I love the fact that all of our guests are giving our wonderful listeners challenges, really fun challenges that they can do together as a family. And that's so cool. Hey, tell everybody where they can find Solve It for Kids, because it's not on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's its own thing.
So please, if you want to keep listening, go over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and subscribe. And you can download all 4 of the first episodes that we have, plus listen to all the new ones we have coming out. You can also find on Stitcher Radio and, of course, through our website, solveitforkids.com.
Jennifer, thanks so much. Thanks for letting me be part of this awesome, awesome, awesome podcast.
Well, we make a great STEM team, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, join us over at solveitforkids.com. Join us right now from Burbank in California. A very, very cool place. My wife and I had such a great weekend out there not too long ago. He is the author of a very cool book that'll be released very soon. It's called Naming Your Little Geek. Please welcome to the show, Scott Rubin. Scott, how are you?
Hello, Jed. I'm happy to be here.
Scott was telling me it's nice and hot out there in Burbank. It was nice and warm in January. I'm sure it's quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, it gets up there into the right around 100 degrees, so it's a hot one here.
Ah, my goodness. And we are recording this in the middle of the great pandemic of 2020. Hopefully it's not the middle. Hopefully we're getting close to the end. And
that would be very nice.
You'll be able to get outside and enjoy some ocean breezes. I have to tell you, when my buddy Kate from our friends at Familius let me know about Naming Your Little Geek, I was immediately intrigued. What a title. Tell us about the title and tell us about the book.
Sure. Thank you very much. Basically, it all stems from when my wife was pregnant with our first son. This was going on 6 years ago, and we were thinking about names to name our son. And we had ideas, but we wanted to look up some things, and mainly we wanted a source where we could look up and see what names have been used by heroes and villains in all of our favorite geek works, movies, TV shows, things like that, comic books. And there wasn't really the right thing that we were looking for. And my wife said, well, you should write it. I said, okay. So that's what I did. And so Naming Your Little Geek is all about looking at names as they've appeared in all of our favorite stories and what those names might bestow upon your child if you named your son or daughter after one of these characters.
Wow, that's cool. Now, is this a book? It doesn't sound like a storybook. It sounds more like a book that would be a real fun read for adults, and maybe a real fun read for adults to read with their kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Technically, it is a baby name book, so it's a reference book that you can use when you're naming a child or, I mean, as geeks, we love to name everything. We name pets after characters. We name our computers, our cars, our Wi-Fi networks, whatever you want, but you name after things. But even, yeah, beyond that, this is definitely, it's a fun book for anybody to pick up because I talk about all of these characters that we all know and love. If your kid's name is a name that's in the book, and I have almost 1,100 names in there, it would be very interesting for a kid to find out where his or her name appears in the pantheon of all of these cool things.
You know, before I go any further, I have to say, you know, I'm almost 100 years old, so, you know, I've seen a lot of change in this world. Probably one of the biggest and maybe most surprising to me is geek. I mean, when I was growing up, one of the worst things you could call someone was a geek. No one wanted to be called a geek, and now it is fully embraced. I have a son and a daughter-in-law who are, you know, love the world of Comic-Cons, and they would probably also embrace the term geek. How did that happen?
You know what? It's a good question. I think it was really helped along by a lot of these really good, well-produced comic book movies, and that really allowed people to enjoy geeky comic booky things without it being in the closet, so to speak, or in the, you know, the privacy of your own home. And yeah, I mean, geeky things are the top rated TV shows, like, you know, most popular, like Game of Thrones and things like that. That's a fantasy world on TV that people are watching. And yeah, and comic book movies are the best, you know, the comic book movies and sci-fi movies are the top grossing movies. So everybody has their own geeky parts to them, no matter what you're interested in.
Well, I mean, I have to admit it. I was just talking to a guest earlier today, and I remembered the first Star Wars when that came out, and I was 18 and 19 years old. I went to the theater to see it 18 or 19 times in the first few months. I didn't let many people know about that, though. So you're right. Geeks have always existed, but we kind of went on the down low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially now also with social media, they always want to share what they're doing. They want to share what movies they're going to, what characters they're dressing up as for holidays and parties. So there's definitely more. The geek has become mainstream. That's
wild. I had an interesting conversation back in January of this year. My wife and I were attending and exhibiting at Kids Expo in Chicago. And at the hotel we were staying at, the one of the service people there was telling us he was from Pakistan, and he was telling us that there was a great tradition of naming children in Pakistan and in Islam, where you would open up the Quran and whatever page you opened up to, and there are so many different terms for the Prophet, whichever one you landed on first, well, that was the name that you should name your child. And I thought that was really kind of cool. I don't know, is that something that you would recommend for folks picking up Naming Your Little Geek?
You know, you bring up a really good point, because yeah, lots of different traditions and lots of cultures and religions have really interesting ways of naming kids. There are all sorts of traditions. For us personally, we go by a Jewish tradition in which we name somebody after somebody who has passed on recently, but we don't give them that same name. We use the first initial. So for instance, for our first son, Benjamin, my father had passed a few years before, and he was Bernard. So we're looking for a B name. And so again, that's something that my book can be very helpful with. If you know the initial that you want, there's a whole chapter, and you can look up all the cool characters. But yeah, so we ended up with Benjamin. And a little bit of a side note, I like to talk in my book about names that are very obviously geeky, that if you meet the person, you would definitely know what their parents were into. Like if you met somebody whose name was Legolas or, or something like that. But there are all of these great names like Benjamin that I refer to as stealth geek names because you wouldn't think immediately that, oh, Benjamin, that's not really a geeky name. But I list out a whole bunch of characters. From the Fantastic Four, the Thing, the big rocky guy, his name is Benjamin Grimm. The very first time we meet Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's Ben Kenobi in the movies.
That's right.
So anyway, yes, there are lots of different traditions for naming. You could certainly flip through my book and pick a random page and a random name. You might get anything from Bill to Slarty Bartfast, depending on what page you end up on.
I'm not going to give the whole story, but when our first child was born, and we were trying to think of a name, my wife said, if it's a boy, you want to name him after yourself? And I'm like, heavens no, absolutely not. Let him have his own name. And then she created a name by mushing a couple of different names together. And I said, absolutely not. That sounds ridiculous. We settled on the tried and true and very common name of Christopher. And it fits. It's a perfect name for Chris. But what is the most, I don't know if I should say outrageous, but unusual name we might be able to find in Name Your Little Geek?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I went pretty deep into a lot of these properties. Some of the best are from these weird science fiction or fantasy stories. So like I mentioned, Slarty Bartfast is a name from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's a pretty weird one.
Yeah.
I have everything from Jabba for Jabba the Hutt and Jar Jar Binks. And on those entries I say maybe this name, keep it for a silly pet you might have, probably not for your kid. But yeah, another thing that kind of like you mentioned with creating a name based on pushing two names together. If you like, I talk about this in the book, that if you like a name, maybe look for a longer version of that name. And then you can use that, especially on the birth certificate, and then you have options for nicknames or short versions. And I say there's what I think is a really pretty name of an elf in a fantasy story, and her name is Laura Lanthalassa. And I always thought that was really pretty. And even in the books, they shorten it to Lorana. But that could be, if you like the name Laura, you can name your daughter Laura, but give her that full name, and then like there's all this hidden mystery to her name that she can unveil whenever she wants.
Well, and that's really cool, but there is a danger to that. There is a danger to that because I imagine the little Laura Lanthanatha would be called Laura from the time she was born.
Sure.
And then maybe you would have the same experience I had when I entered first grade. And the teacher took the roll, and did I miss anybody? And I raised my hand, and my two cousins were there. You missed him. And she said, what's your name? And I said, Jed. And she goes, no. And I said, no, it is. My cousins were there. And she said, no, your name is this. And I go, no, that's my dad. And this was a much, much less friendly time. And they just sent me home, and they said, go ask your parents what your name is.
Wow, that's so funny. I'm not saying it's funny because it happened to you, but
it was right.
my stepfather has the exact same story. Well, different names, but he was always Brad, and he went to school, and they called all the names, and they never called his name. And he said, "You didn't call on me," and they said, "No, your name is Dwayne." I've never heard the name Dwayne before. But his family just always called him Brad, but his first name was Dwayne.
Yeah, our family, we have a lot of undercover names. It can be very confusing when I get up and I'm like at a legal thing and they go and call my name and I think like, that's your name? I'm like, yeah, it's my name. So, this sounds like it just so much fun. I imagine, the 9 months leading up to a child's birth. It's such a magical time. It's such a difficult time. It's, this seems like a wonderful way on those difficult days where, your wife is just struggling, and it's difficult and you're trying the best to make her happy and nothing is working. Doesn't matter where you get that steak and cheese sub from. She's not going to be happy with it. This would be a great thing to just break out and go, okay, let's find some geeky names.
Yeah, I think that people are really going to enjoy this. Yeah, during like you said, that very interesting, very stressful, but also wonderful time of being pregnant and looking forward to a child. And like we picked early on, we picked names that we liked, but we didn't narrow it down until pretty far into into the process, as it were. So yes, this is definitely something that I think people will like to just sit down and read through. I think it would be a great baby shower gift, especially for geeky people. And again, I think even people who aren't pregnant will enjoy sitting down, flipping through this. I think the first thing people are going to do is look and see if their own name is in the book, and then just flip through and see random characters.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, I was wondering. I don't think there's a Jedley in your book. I think I created that geekiness myself.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no Jedley. There are some other versions of Jed that I talk about, but yeah, no Jedley specifically.
Well, I'll probably get the book from Kate anyways, but so you can't leave me hanging here. What are the kind of versions of Jed do you have there?
Oh well, I mean, there are in a couple of comic books there have been Jed characters. So there was an undersea metahuman that interacts with Aquaman sometimes named Jed. There's a farmer named Jed, which is kind of obvious. But there have been some other characters, some Jedediahs, and things like that. So taking like the old versions of some of these names.
Awesome. Did your wife have any favorite names? Was there a name out there that your wife said, yeah, if I have this or that, this is what I want?
My wife and I definitely have different tastes when it comes to some names. As I said, we knew we wanted a B name specifically for our son. I was looking at things like, I like Barry. That's the name of the Flash, the most famous of the Flash characters, the one that's on TV right now. So I was thinking about Barry. My wife was looking more at Bastion, which, if you remember, is the name of the young boy who's reading the book in The Neverending Story. There's some other Bastions out there as well. But we happily met together and we both liked Benjamin, so that worked well. And then actually, we had another son while I was writing the book in the long process of it, and we were looking for an M name, and we both pretty quickly, we both liked Max and Maximilian. So his name is Maximilian. We call him Maximilian or Max. It all works.
Awesome. I'm wondering now. You did share with us the Laura name was very pretty, and I could see a kid really kind of owning that, and even at one point in her life, even if she grows up being called Laura, getting to a point when she's a teenager or a young 20-year-old deciding I want the whole name. I want to own that. But there are some other names that you refer to that I can see some, Frank Zappa named his kid Moon Unit and Dweezil.
Yeah.
So I imagine there might be someone who picks up your book and names in one of those really outrageous names. Do you ever worry that like 20 years from now there might be some kid come up to you on the street and go, "You're the dude who wrote the book that made me"?
When it comes to names that are particularly difficult to pronounce or spell, in the entry, I always try to offer some advice on things that you can do for nicknames, or maybe look at this other one. So I do try to keep that in mind. But I figure these days, celebrities are naming their kids the most ridiculous things, and as we've got some children in the other room, and as I talk about with my son, names and words, they're just. I'm a big student of languages. I studied Greek and Latin, and I like to talk about how the way we communicate, it's just sounds. It's just sounds that we made up to mean things, and names are sort of the best example of that. We call each other names. We call each other nicknames. We have pet names for one another. Pick something you like and go with it. And, like you said, make it your own.
Yep. Well, growing up here in Irish Catholic Boston, nobody used their birth name. It was always Okie or Sully or Dewey or Stinky or, whatever. this is really wonderful. Now, Name Your Little Geek is available for pre-order right now. It's going to be published by our friends from Familius in July. Now that this book is about to, well, we don't know if it's about to hit the shelves. It's about to hit the distribution center at any rate.
Exactly.
Who knows when you'll be able to go to a store and actually, if there are any stores left, and buy the book. But do you have the writing bug right now? Are you planning? Do you have a work in progress? Something you can let us know about?
I mean, at this point, I'm looking at a couple of different projects. Like Jed, like you said, we're sort of during the pandemic, so we're all at home at this point. I really love the subject of names. I'd love to write more name books, maybe focusing on a different aspect, maybe not geeks next time, but looking at some other form. I've got some things that I'm thinking about. Nothing ready for prime time, but definitely look out for more books from Scott Rubin coming up.
Wow, I just got the imagination going here, and what could it be? Name your own. I don't know, because I was going to say superhero, but that's already in the geek realm, right? Yeah.
Well, yes, I have lots of superheroes in Naming Your Little Geek. Yes.
Well, so we're coming to the end of our time here together. I'm wondering if there was somebody out there listening and they're expecting twins and they know it's going to be a boy and a girl, and they like everything. They like superheroes, they like comics, they like professional wrestling. They like it all. What two names would you suggest?
That is an excellent question, and I do in the book talk about some names that are either particularly good for twins or siblings or particularly bad. Again, bringing up the Game of Thrones things. If you have a boy and a girl, you probably don't want to name them Cersei and Jaime. Just throwing that out there.
Okay.
But if you want to look for names that are good for a boy and a girl, particularly twins, Jaina and hold on, where is it here? I just had it in front of me. Jaina and Zan. So those were the Wonder Twins, and those were kind of cool. And it's Zan is a little offbeat, but again, name the kid Xander. Short form is Zan. It all works out. But yes, I do have a lot of notes in the book about how names might be paired together, both for the good and then maybe not so good. But I should say, talking about, it's not like I'm suggesting you don't name your kids this, but I do in the book talk about names, especially that maybe have been used for characters who aren't so nice, but the name, at the end of the day, it's just a name. You are certainly free. Any child can enjoy any name and, like we said before, make it your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my wife and I are guilty of having some fun with names. We are a bicultural family. And we gave my daughter definitely names from both cultures. And when she had her test for her driver's license, the first thing the inspector said when he sat in the vehicle was, Mexican first name, Irish last name. What's going on with that?
Yeah, there are all sorts of fun combinations you can get into with names. Yeah, like you said, and there are names that are pushed together. There's a popular character right now in the Expanse series, and her name is Chris Jen, which is super unique. I didn't find any examples of that outside of that work, but I thought that was great. So there's an entry in the book for that one.
Wow, awesome. Scott, are there any places online where folks can connect with you, find out more about Naming Your Little Geek, and find out what's the next world that you're pulling names from?
Yep, absolutely. So yes, you can pre-order Naming Your Little Geek wherever books are sold, and you can find me on any and all of the social media platforms. I use the same name on every single one of them. It's Norse Meat. Norse Meat. It's a name that came to me in a dream, and I use it for all of my social media stuff. It's easy to remember. But yes, I'm especially on Twitter all the time. Come and talk to me about names and family stuff. I love it.
Interesting. And you can ask him about that dream when Norse Meat came to him.
Right. Yes.
Hey, it could be interesting. We've had a great time talking about names, talking about a great book coming from our friends from Familius, Naming Your Little Geek. We've been speaking with the author, Scott Rubin. Scott, I've had a blast speaking with you tonight. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jed. I appreciate it.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Annette Marie Griffin. She's going to be telling us all about what is family. We love that this is such a wonderful resource for families. At least that's what people are telling us, and we're really honored that so many families spend time with us. We're also honored by the fact that so many families look to us for suggestions as to what kind of books that they should add to their family library. Of course, they get lots of ideas by listening to our guests here on the show. The other way they come to us for recommendations is by checking out our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Hall of Fame. Our Certified Great Read program, we have a team of evaluators, and if they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read. And with that status comes a number of really fantastic tools that can help your book stand out from the thousands of books that are published every single month. It really is incredible how many books are out there. And it's really incredible how hard it is to get people to notice your book. And this is one way that can really help out. So if you are the author and you're struggling to find ways to let people know about your book because the traditional ways of promotion, school visits, book signings, library visits, they're not available to us right now, and probably not in the foreseeable future. Why don't you do yourself a favor? Go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, check out our author services button at the top of the page. Find out all about this great program. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, of course, starting with our guest, Scott Rubin. Also want to thank my incredible team, including my producer, Fatima Khan, my author ambassador, Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.